Hey you, guess what? 2 weeks till Thanksgiving. Yes. Alright guys, so we're going to be starting Unit 4 today, in which we're going to be talking about terrestrial and aquatic biomes, and it eventually is going to lead us into talking about different types of species, endangered and invasive. Alright, so I know that you guys remember the basic biomes from elementary school, but there are specific characteristics that you need to know for each one. So we're going to go through all of those right now. All right. So the first thing that we need to understand is what determines the type of biome. Okay. We know that obviously it's going to be where it's located, but that also depends on, if you look at the notes over here, temperature and precipitation. Okay, so climate, remember climate is the long-term average of temperature and precipitation. Okay, so climate is determined by temperature and precipitation. All right, now another thing that will also help us identify biomes is by the dominant plant species that are found there. So this is also determined by the dominant vegetation. And as you guys know, vegetation, plants, is also determined by temperature and precipitation. So temperature and precipitation. For example, you can't take a cactus and go plant it in Canada in the tundra and expect it to survive. Okay. All right. So we have three main global temperature zones or areas. Okay. So the first thing I want to do is to draw a circle. Okay. That's the Earth. Remember, the equator goes right down the middle. Okay? So this is what we consider to be our tropical areas. So the first one is tropical. Remember that we have the greatest input of sun at the equator, so that's why it's going to be a tropical, warm temperature zone. Okay. So when we go above and below that equator line, we're moving into what we call the temperate. Okay, so it's going to be the same down here. Temperate. So these temperate zones typically are going to see all 4 seasons. You would not see all 4 seasons in the tropical area. It's going to be warm year-round. Okay, so temperate. And then the last one, when we get to the poles, guess what? It's polar. So these are going to be our coldest locations because they receive the least amount of sunlight. All right. Now, one thing I want to make sure that you guys understand is you're going to see the word altitude pop up quite a bit. So imagine yourself climbing a mountain. All right. We measure altitude by how far away you are from the surface of the planet. So when you're climbing a mountain, you're increasing your altitude. You're going higher up in the air. So when we have an increase in altitude, all right, what do you think that's going to cause? Is the temperature going to get warmer or is it going to get cooler? Well, if you said cooler, then you're correct. So when you're going up, the temperature is actually dropping. So an increase in altitude causes a decrease in temperature. And that also will affect the dominant vegetation that's found. Okay? And it's just because there's less oxygen up there, so it's not able to trap as much heat. All right, so we know that we have 3 main temperature zones, okay? But we can also break down our biomes into 3 specific types. Okay, so there's 3 categories of biomes. We have deserts. They can be warm or cold. We have grasslands, and we have forests. And forests can be warm or cold. All right? So they're determined by if they're in the polar, the temperate, or the tropical zone. All right? So with deserts, we can have a warm desert, and we can have a cold desert. So what would a cold desert be? Antarctica. There's nothing there. There's no plant life. Any type of animal life is frozen. Okay? So those are both considered to be deserts. Now, what characteristics do they both have? Okay, so I'm going to go and erase this. And y'all are like, Miss Matter, dang, I already wrote my line there. It's okay. Okay, so what characteristics do deserts have? Oh, dang it. Okay. We know that they have a lack of precipitation. Sorry, y'all, my handwriting's getting really rough. Lack of precipitation, low vegetation, low diversity. There's just not a lot of different animals and plants. And they're fragile. They're very fragile ecosystems, which means we say they have low resilience. Meaning if there's some type of disaster or disturbance there, they don't rebound from that very easily or fast. Okay? All right. Now, grasslands, these are definitely going to be temperate. Grasslands are typically found, we have a big area of grassland in the United States. So they're usually going to be in that area right above, right below the equator. Okay, so obviously the dominant vegetation is going to be grasses. Okay, we know that these areas are typically going to be dominated by hooved animals. So what's an example of a hooved animal? Horses, cows, buffalo. So they're going to eat the grass because, you know, that's just where they live. So hooved animals, we're going to put in parentheses that they're herbivores. Okay. They do have occasional fires. And I don't want you to think that all fires are bad. Fires can be good for ecosystems because it can take out damaged or diseased plants, and it puts those nutrients back into the soil. Now, if it's set by a human, obviously that's not going to be a good fire. But a lot of fires, at least historically, have been caused by lightning. All right. So then let's move on to forests. So forests also, guys, can be warm and cold. Okay? You've got tropical rainforests, warm. You've got the boreal forest, cold. All right? So with forests, guess what? Trees, right? Lots of trees. And there typically is going to be high rainfall. If it's a colder one, it's going to be snow. All right? So what are human impacts on these 3 ecosystems? So human impact is what we call anthropogenic. So hopefully you guys remember that from our eutrophication. All right, so what is a human impact in the desert? Depletion of groundwater. Okay, so depletion of groundwater. Oh, well, y'all, I spelled it wrong. Let's try again. Y'all know I'm on the struggle bus with this sometimes. All right. Depletion of groundwater. When we're tapping our underwater resources, if they're not being replenished, then that is a problem. All right, grasslands, overgrazing, meaning there are too many animals and they're eating too much food, so the grass isn't able to grow back fast enough. And a lot of times these are converted to croplands. We need more room to grow food because guess what? What's happening to the human population? It's going up. All right. With forests, the number one human impact is deforestation. So less trees, we're taking away a major carbon sink, so we're going to have more carbon dioxide trapped in the atmosphere. Okay, so in the next video, we're going to go over terrestrial ecosystems.